Last month, I posted a nearly 3-hour-long deep dive about the Netflix show Love on the Spectrum. I had a lot of mixed feelings on the show, and one of the pieces of the show that gave me mixed feelings was the dating coach, Jennifer Cook. On Love on the Spectrum, some participants would meet with Jennifer before their dates, and she would give them advice about how to be successful on a date, everything from finding ways not to dominate the conversation and make sure you're asking the other person questions, to taking safe items with you to remain comfortable, and even some strange advice like pulling out your date's chair that for me felt like it was more to make the neurotypical viewers feel comfortable than to actually help the autistic participants. Jennifer Cook is autistic herself, and as I said in my Love on the Spectrum review, I loved that this show included an example of an adult autistic woman who's been married for a long time and has children of her own. That is a perspective that I think is sorely missing from a lot of media. But at the same time, I felt that the show greatly underutilized her. However, the most exciting thing that I learned about Jennifer is that she's a writer just like me. She wrote a book, or rather, she's written multiple books, but today we are going to review one book in particular, and that is her 2018 memoir called Autism in Heels: The Untold Story of a Female Life on the Spectrum. This book was not perfect by any means. It does have its flaws, it has some areas where it really falls short, and I'm going to discuss all of those in depth as we review it, but overall, I really liked this book, and I think it has a lot of really valuable information. Reading this book gave me a lot of emotions. When I've reviewed a lot of self-help books and memoirs in the past, I've often gotten really annoyed with writers who say, "We feel like this," or "We all have felt this before," or "When we notice this, we may get angry or feel this way." If you watch some of my old Boss Babe self-help book reviews, you'll probably notice that a common criticism I have is, who is we? I don't know what emotion you're talking about here. It's probably my most recurring criticism of Brené Brown, whose work I cannot relate to because I don't think I feel emotions in the same way that she does. This book, Autism in Heels, is the very first book where whenever the author said, "We feel this," or "We tend to do this," I was like, yeah, you're right, I do. It was the first time when an author said "we" that I felt that I was included in that. Going into this book, I assumed that I wasn't going to be able to relate based on the title, Autism in Heels. I was like, well, yes, I am autistic, but I can't wear heels because I have scoliosis, and if I wear heels for even an hour, my back is going to be out of commission for a week. I may end up back in physical therapy for the millionth time, so I don't think I can relate. And then I was like, I'm probably taking the title too literally. The book probably isn't about the shoes themselves. Thanks, autism! This book made me feel seen. It made me realize that people like Abby's mom from Love on the Spectrum who think that autism doesn't really describe us all equally are just objectively wrong. It's really easy to feel imposter syndrome about being autistic when you weren't diagnosed as a child, especially when you have so many #autism moms who want to diminish your experience. This book, in one fell swoop, cured my imposter syndrome. I almost cried from how much I related to Jennifer's experiences multiple times, and I went into it not expecting to relate. Jennifer Cook is very different than I am. She's a Gen Xer, she's about 15 years older than I am. I think she's heterosexual, though I can't know for sure, but based on her writing, it kind of seems that way. She has multiple children, whereas I'm child-free, likely for life, and she wears heels, which I physically cannot do. Yet reading this book felt like I was looking at myself in the mirror. Almost every single thing she said unlocked a memory for me from my own life and explained so much behind my own difficulties coping with society or developing maladaptive, self-destructive behaviors that I've had to spend a lot of time overcoming. So yeah, I loved this book, but when I sat down to write the script for this review, I also felt this deep visceral anger inside of my body. This woman is a treasure trove of information. She has so many important things to share about how autism uniquely impacts women, how it leads to increased rates of eating disorders, increased risk of domestic violence, and unique difficulties navigating socialization, let alone the dating world. So why the fuck wasn't any of the information in this book on the show Love on the Spectrum? I don't think it's Jennifer's fault. In fact, I'm about to become one of Jennifer's biggest defenders, even though she does have some beliefs that I don't completely agree with, which we will discuss. But the more I learn about Jennifer and her unique set of experiences, her expansive knowledge on autism in women, and the incredible advice she has to offer, the more I'm mad at how underutilized she was on the show. And that is an anger that I am choosing to direct at Cian O'Cleary, the creator of Love on the Spectrum, who, as I discussed in my deep dive a few weeks ago, has chosen to categorize his Netflix Netflix dating reality show as a documentary to capitalize on a loophole where he doesn't have to pay the cast. Now, you could say, well, what if the show really is a documentary? What if he's not lying about that? It's not, okay? It's not. Because if it were, they would have given less airtime to the ableist ass autism parents like Abby's mom Christine and Tanner's mom Nikki, and they would have given more airtime to Jennifer Cook, a woman with professional experience working as a domestic violence counselor who regularly gives speeches about the importance of looking for autism signs that may be disproportionately affecting girls and women, who has knowledge and advice that could literally save autistic women's lives. So with all of that in mind, let's dive into the specifics of Jennifer Cook's memoir, Autism in Heels.
Get you some nuts.
Yeah, you effing.
Up yours, woke moralist. We'll see who cancels who.
Hey everyone, I'm Savvy and welcome to Savvy Writes Books. If you're new, don't forget to click the subscribe button because on this channel I regularly post videos including book reviews, video essays, media analysis, and more. I want to give a quick shout out to my Patreon supporters. Thank you guys so much for continuing to support this channel. Patreon supporters' names are up on the screen, and also, if you take a look in my description below, you will find that my $5 a month and up Patreon supporters have the option to link their own stuff in my description below. So if you want to see links to people who are starting their own Etsy shop, selling their own art, starting their own publishing houses, linking their own social causes and campaigns and things like that, you'll definitely want to check all of that out in my description below. I really appreciate all of my Patreon supporters, and if any of you guys are interested in getting behind the scenes looks at what I do, blog posts about my own writing processes and reflections on events that I do, additional bonus content and things like that, then don't forget to check out the Patreon page as well. Today, we will be doing another book review, which is one of my favorite types of videos to do. And one of the reasons that I love book reviews so much is that I also love to write books, which I think gives me a solid perspective on many different aspects of the book creation process. Writing, editing, publishing, marketing a book, there's a lot of different steps to the process, which is why I am thankful for today's sponsor, Milanote, which helps keep me organized when I'm preparing to publish a new book. Milanote is an organizational tool that lets you map out your various projects as different boards, where you can then add different features like tables, images, checklists, and more. Currently, I'm using Milanote to map out the different steps I need to complete in order to release my new novel, Not Straight, which is the YA novel that I'm planning to publish in June of 2026. Right now, I'm finishing my major revisions on that book, and then I'm going to send it to beta readers, then to an editor, and meanwhile, I've got all kinds of other release day goodies that I'm working on in the background, like bracelets and stickers and things with my original art to go along with the book. Milanote makes it easy for me to brainstorm these ideas, organize them into individual boards, and then organize those boards into concrete steps that I can easily visualize and then put into practice. Milanote includes over 100 built-in templates to help you lay out your ideas, to-do lists, and more. For example, Milanote offers a social media calendar template which can help you plan out your social media posts, something I'm going to be doing a lot as my book gets closer and closer to release time when I really want to create a big splash on Instagram. Milanote also has a mobile app which can be great if you're getting lots of ideas on the go. Me personally, I prefer to sit down with my desktop computer or maybe on the couch with a laptop and lose myself in the process, which is why I'm happy that Milanote has such a user-friendly desktop interface as well. I really like how many layers deep I can go with different boards on Milanote, which is so helpful for organizing all the different stages of a wide variety of different creative projects. If Milanote sounds like something that you think you'd enjoy as well, then go ahead and give it a try by going to my description below and clicking on my link milanote.com/savvywritesbooks0925. Thank you so much to Milanote for sponsoring today's video. Don't forget to check out the link in my description below. Now, let's dive into our book review. In the first chapter of the book, Jennifer discusses some of the issues with the research done by Dr. Hans Asperger. On page 4 to 5, she says, "In the early days of autism research, the foundational days really, teams of all male scientists, like Dr. Hans Asperger, observed all male patients, mostly children. Eventually, Ironically, those clinicians' notes became the basis of the autism profile. Logically, more boys fit criteria that came from studying and describing boys. No wonder I couldn't find my reflection. How is a catalog of autism spectrum characteristics based on little boys in pre-war Vienna going to help me? Yes, okay. Jennifer also goes more in depth later in the book about how the field of medicine has historically looked at men as the default human, and as a result has missed a lot of how various things can impact women, especially if those signs are less common in men. I've made an entire video in the past about the difficulties that I've had navigating the healthcare world as a woman, so that's to say that I really like how Jennifer calls out sexism in medical research. At the same time, there is one glaring hole in this book that we have to address. Jennifer rightly criticizes Hans Asperger's methods, which I appreciate, and we do need to keep in mind that this book came out in 2018, which was just 5 years after the DSM absorbed the Asperger's diagnosis into the larger autism spectrum diagnosis, so I don't think that any oversights she has regarding Asperger's are necessarily malicious, but for all the criticism she has of Hans Asperger, she never mentions the huge elephant in the room, the big thing wrong with him. He was working for the Nazis. As the UK's National Autistic Society explains, while the concept of autism being a spectrum condition is considered important and useful today, explicit reliance on Hans Asperger's work is now controversial. Hans Asperger worked with the Nazis during the Holocaust, and his abhorrent descriptions of some autistic children as being less worthwhile than others led to dozens of children being sent to a Nazi clinic where they were murdered. There had previously been debate about how much Hans Asperger knew about what the Nazis were doing and whether in fact his work has saved some autistic children from death. However, more recent research has discredited this narrative by showing that Hans Asperger was aware that he was sending children to their death at a Nazi euthanasia clinic and had made statements in line with the Nazi regime's murderous ideology of racial purity. Again, I will reiterate that I don't think the lack of context here is necessarily malicious on Jennifer's part because, you know, she's a Gen Xer, and even though she didn't learn she was autistic until adulthood, she was originally diagnosed with Asperger's, as were her children, as that was the diagnosis used at the time, and that was the rhetoric people learned at the time. But I do think that leaving out this context is a decent-sized flaw of the book and is worthy of critique because this book is overall so informative and so helpful that it seems a shame to leave out this crucial piece of information when it's such a good resource otherwise. You know, part of me also wonders if, because Jennifer is involved in a lot of autism advocacy circles and works with a lot of organizations, and, you know, thankfully she never mentions Autism Speaks, and I don't think she's affiliated with them, but she does work with some controversial figures in autism advocacy spaces like Temple Grandin, you know, people like that sometimes, so I do wonder if she's choosing not to discuss Hans Asperger's Nazi connection so that she doesn't alienate colleagues of hers who still identify with the Asperger's label, but I'm not really sure. Regardless of the reason, it was an area where the book was lacking. There weren't a ton of those areas, but that was probably the biggest one. There's a couple more, but that's kind of the glaring one. Towards the beginning of the book, there were a couple areas like this where I really liked learning the information that Jennifer was sharing with me, and the takeaway from it I completely agreed with, but I also felt like there was a piece missing, like an extra bit of context or a deeper digging that could have taken the book to another level. For example, on pages 7 to 8, Jennifer says, Dr. Asperger's patients apparently love train timetables, maps of their routes too. The modern parent questionnaires I've had to fill out for my own children's diagnoses asked whether they played with wheels on toy cars, which many girls don't even have. Those dang train timetables weren't the key, they were going about it backwards. Does the child line up toys like trucks or trains had been a question on kids' evaluation forms. One had, the other two, well, they'd sort of displayed things. I certainly hadn't lined up trucks or trains. I didn't even have any trucks or trains, which, as I thought about it, were examples of toys that do sort of line up even in typical play. I thought this was super interesting. We've all probably heard the stereotype that autistic people love trains, and in my experience, that's one of the few stereotypes of any group of people that I've found to usually be true. Being on a long train ride makes me feel so comfy and safe. I'm often just as excited to ride the train to go somewhere than I am for the trip or the destination itself. I love trains. I fit the stereotype. But when I read this passage, my autistic brain also went, okay, but what do you mean that many girls don't have toy trains? Like, yeah, that's probably true, but why? One of the ways that my autism manifests is through needing to ask why about everything that to me doesn't have an obvious, immediate logical explanation. So if you told me most children don't have elaborate train sets, like most children in general, I'd be like, well, yeah, sure, because the growing wealth gap in the United States and the increasing in prices on luxury goods means that people are cutting back in general, right? But if you just told me more young boys have trains than young girls, I'd be like, why? why do parents choose to buy boys trains, trucks, and cars and things like that, but not girls? And to be honest, I've just never really understood why we have gender divides in toys at all. Maybe that's because I'm very active in the adult American Girl doll fandom, which has plenty of men too. As a kid, most of all, I just wanted paper and pencils to write. I love toys as an adult much more than I did as a kid. So I guess maybe for me, my experience isn't entirely typical. And I'm not saying that Jennifer needs to have the one true answer as to why parents are more likely to gravitate towards certain toys for certain genders, or to unpack millennia of pre-industrial revolution gender roles and how they still impact us today. I mean, although she does do that a little bit later in the book and does a fairly decent job of it, but this still made me be like, all right, buy your daughter a train, Jennifer. Your daughter's autistic, get the girl a train. Disclaimer, that was a joke. I don't know Jennifer's kids or what toys they like. Maybe they don't like trains, that's totally fine, but like, get your autistic daughter a train. I guess you could make the argument, right, that sexism impacts us all, and modern parents aren't immune from the unstated pressures of toy gender designations, and even if those divides feel like they're less prevalent now than they were in the 80s and 90s. So because some parents are going to default to buying cars, trucks, and trains for their boys but not their girls, regardless of why parents are doing that, the autism assessment does specifically ask about the kid being obsessed with trains, and that is going to lead to a disparity in diagnosis, regardless of what the reason is. My tangent there was more out of my own curiosity than of any direct criticism of Jennifer's writing, if that makes sense. Sometimes I just need to work through my thought processes out loud. I hope that's okay. Like I said, Jennifer does sometimes attempt to unpack how centuries and centuries of various gender roles and expectations have impacted the different ways girls versus boys are socialized, and how that might lead to autism manifesting in different ways in each group. On pages 22 to 23, she explains, "It takes a village to raise a child, not so much to take down a woolly mammoth. We may finally live in a world where anyone can do the child rearing or mammoth hunting, but the sociological effect of millennia remains. Generally speaking, women have long relied upon community and interdependence. Our survival and the survival of our children required the strength of numbers. Is it any wonder then that our interactions would still be governed by such nuance and subtlety?" And again, I think that's super interesting, but we need to go so much deeper. Jennifer, I'm autistic, you're autistic. You know that isn't enough to satisfy an autistic woman's curiosity. So this is just a me problem, okay? Because one of my autistic traits is that I've never really understood or internalized gender roles, so I've largely ignored them, even if it made other people upset. When I was in high school, for example, I used to get bullied because I didn't shave my legs, but I really didn't like the sensory experience of having perfectly smooth skin, and I didn't see any logical reason that I had to do it, so I just chose not to. And if people bullied me, I was like, wow, that's really sexist of you, and just got into fights about it. I don't know how I didn't realize I was autistic right then and there with that explanation I just gave. I was like, the sensory experience of having shaved legs feels bad, so I'm not going to do it. There's no logical reason. I have never felt the social pressure. Like, the autism signs were obvious. Actually, funny story, okay? When I was in high school, one of my friends got an autism diagnosis, and when we were eating lunch one day, he told me that he thought I might have autism too, and I was like, I don't have autism. And he was like, it's not a bad thing. It's okay to be autistic. And I was like, I know it's not a bad thing. I never said it was a bad thing. I'm just not autistic. Maybe I should text him later and tell him that he was right. I wonder if he even remembers that. But like, autistic people are pretty good at noticing each other and seeing those traits in each other, even if we don't notice it in ourselves right away. Isn't that funny? I think that's funny. Anyway, my point is, growing up, I never really understood what it meant to be socialized as male or female. I do know that, like, for example, I was growing up Catholic as a child, so I was told specific things out loud directly that women are supposed to do, like dress modestly or not have sex before marriage, not abort your fetuses, etc. But I was like, actually, I'll do what I want. And yeah, I would get in trouble for that, and I'd be like, you can call me difficult all you want. It's not going to change the fact that I'm not going to go out of my way to do something that I can't see any point in doing. People just thought I was really difficult and argumentative and combative growing up. Everyone in my family has this impression of me that I enjoy arguing. I don't. I find arguing extremely stressful. I don't like it. I never have. But people think I like it because I'm just like not willing to just give in to things if I don't want to. It's a self-defense thing. It's not arguing. So I guess my question about this passage is, yes, I can see how in a pre-industrialized world, women likely felt pressure to focus on community building for the sake of their own survival, especially in a world where giving birth to children wasn't really much of a choice at the time. But I think Jennifer could have done better at giving a direct, explicit explanation as to how that still plays out in today's world and why that has transferred over. Like, sure, people might still pressure women to behave in the same ways, but I don't understand understand why most autistic women would necessarily always pick up on those pressures in the same way, if that makes sense. I don't know, maybe I'm looking at my personal experiences and judging this with too narrow of a lens. Also, I'm not sure if I agree that it doesn't take a village to take down a woolly mammoth. Like, maybe you don't need to get the whole town involved, but you probably need more than one person. I could be wrong, though. I don't know. I'm not a hunter or a gatherer. I'm just an autistic little goblin. Later on page 23, Jennifer explains, in 2012, Francesca Happ, a cognitive neuroscientist at King's College London, observed 15,000 boy-girl twins. Her research team measured the occurrence of autistic traits within that group, compared them against formal autism diagnoses, and came away with important, though sadly not surprising, results. When the boys and girls showed similar levels of autism characteristics, girls had to display either more significant intellectual disabilities than the boys, more behavioral problems than the boys, or more of both in order to be diagnosed. Kevin Pelfrey, a leading autism researcher at Yale University's acclaimed Child Study Center and the father of a daughter on the spectrum, thinks he knows why. His team has discovered that the way in which brains of girls with autism analyze social information is reduced relative to neurotypical girls. So I really like these moments where we get facts, studies, experts weighing in on the lack of autism recognition when it comes to girls and women. I was reflecting a lot on my own teen and young adult years recently, and I was talking with my husband about how obvious the autism signs were. So Tyler and I have known each other since we were 11 years old. We met in our 6th grade homeroom. So he's seen me grow up. I've seen him grow up. We've known everything about each other for like 20 years at this point. And I always keep hearing that a reason women go undiagnosed when it comes to autism is that women are more likely to be high masking. But when we were reflecting on my younger years, we were like, I was never high masking. I was just pretty. Let me explain this, okay? I've always kind of had this chip on my shoulder, especially growing up. I've had issues with overconfidence, which Jennifer does kind of discuss later, which I appreciate. We'll get into that. But I've always talked way too loud without even realizing it. And then if people were like, Savvy, you're being too loud, I wouldn't then decide to start masking. Instead, I would be like, loud is who I am. And in school, they taught me that you're supposed to love people for who they are and never to change for anybody. So I'm not going to be quieter for your sake. Looking back, it's no wonder so many people found me annoying. But my point is, there was no high masking going on with me. I openly stimmed in public. I talked at a volume way too loud to be appropriate for any situation. The inside voice reminders were a big deal with me. And see, when I dominated conversations or monopolized the talking time, I wasn't trying to monopolize other people's time. I just figured, okay, if other people have something to contribute to the conversation, they'll jump in and start talking, because that's what I did. When I had something to contribute, I jumped in. No one had to invite me or ask me. No, so why don't they just do that too? Again, I'm trying to work on these things now as an adult because I don't want to be annoying to other people, but my point is I was never high masking, yet nobody noticed I was autistic, even though it was aggressively obvious. My autistic traits were never subtle. I walked on my toes exclusively for years, from like up until age 7, I think. I used to bang my head on the floor whenever I got frustrated. I'd talk at a volume that sounded like I was trying to fill an auditorium without a microphone, just in everyday conversation. I had sensory issues that prevented me from shaving my body hair, and when people would tell me that made me less feminine, I'd be like, that's illogical. I did math really quickly in my head since early childhood. I finished all of my high school's math offerings 2 years early. When my mom signed me up for youth soccer and ballet as a little kid, I kept getting in trouble from wandering away from the group and just staring off into space without even realizing that I wasn't supposed to be doing that. Like, the autism was so obvious, but instead I was told she's just difficult. She'll grow out of it. One day when she gets married and has kids, she'll look back and think this rebellious behavior was ridiculous. I just have never felt so seen or so understood as I did when I reached page 40 of this book, which is called The Chick List Checklist, which is a list of qualities that Jennifer gives that are more common to manifest in autistic girls and women than in any other particular group. And y'all, okay, it's like she cracked the code to my entire life. This list, when I read this, I almost broke down crying because I have never felt like I was this understood in my entire life. So I went through the list and I highlighted some of the items that apply to me specifically, and even some of the ones that don't, like if there were parts that did. We're not going to read every single example because I don't want this video to go on forever, but we're going to go through some of them because I think they're super interesting. The first item on the list is that autistic women are more likely than autistic men to fake eye contact. So autistic people in general tend to struggle with eye contact. Jennifer explains that autistic women are more likely to fake it, though, by like looking at someone's forehead or the bridge of their nose or the space right between their eyes. This one for me was kind of true and kind of false. In everyday conversations, I don't do this. My eyes are just darting around the room and I don't think about it because it takes a lot of mental energy to even think about trying to look in between someone's eyes. So I'm usually like looking off at the side, up at the ceiling, who knows where. But specifically, I did learn how to fake eye contact when I was a competitive debater in high school. On the speech and debate team, eye contact can be a part of the overall score that they give you for presentation. It's not just about your arguments themselves, it's also about how you present those arguments to the crowd. Now, if you were primarily a cross-sex debater or a policy debater, you might be like, no, that's not true. But I competed primarily in public forum debate and original oratory, so for me, yes, the judges cared a lot about eye contact. That was the biggest area where I'd regularly get comments from judges in my high school speech and debate career. I needed to work on eye contact. I needed not to look up at the ceiling or at the wall or stare off into space so much, but eye contact hurts. Eye contact is difficult. How can people just make eye contact like that? Again, oh my god, the autism signs were so obvious. Anyway, I didn't want to lose points because back in high school I was hella competitive and I wanted to win at everything at all costs, so I learned to look at people's foreheads, or I'd find spots on the wall that seemed close enough to people's eye levels so that the judges might assume I'm looking at someone in the audience. But now that nobody is literally assigning me point values based on eye contact anymore, I just let my eyes go where they go. When I'm filming videos, I make an effort to try to look at the camera, but I don't always succeed at that, so sorry, I'm looking at the camera right now. What a cruel trick of the universe, though, right? The speech and debate team is the place where you have a specific allotted time slot to talk uninterrupted, where you get to info dump about all the intensive research you've done on a specific topic and make logical flowchart style connections for how you landed at specific conclusions. And that's the sport where they literally judge you for your eye contact. That's so funny. Jennifer then talks about how women often develop special interests, and sometimes girls' special interests can be different from boys. She talks a lot about musical theater as a special interest, which I think is mainly because she was a musical theater kid and that was her special interest. I personally cannot sing at all. I do sing a lot of times as a vocal stim. I often walk around singing and I'm unable to stop. Even in high school, I just sing all these little stupid songs that I made up while I walked around, and people will be like, why are you singing? And I'd be like, because that's my background music. The autism signs were so obvious. Oh my god. Anyway, my special interests include American Girl dolls, the taxonomical order of primates and the evolution of each genus there within, and the queer history of Star Trek, the original series. Later in this book, we will learn that Jennifer is also a Star Trek fan. Quick side note, autistic people being Star Trek fans makes a lot of sense, and that's very common. Like, when I first introduced one of my friends to Star Trek, specifically The Next Generation, he was like, have you noticed that these characters are always just saying exactly and directly what they mean? And I was like, you know, I never noticed that before, but there's a reason I never feel stressed while I'm watching Star Trek. And I think a lot of autistic people really relate to Vulcans. Like, we have emotions, but we struggle to know and express them in a way that others will relate to. And as a result, we can often start viewing our impulses to prioritize logic as a form of intelligence rather than just a different style of communication. Jennifer mentions relating to Spock in this book multiple times. Girl, I get it, okay? Okay, but this was the item on the list that started to push me over the edge. People on the spectrum are more likely to experience synesthesia. Girls are 3 times more likely to be synesthetes. Okay, you guys, I've always had these thoughts in my head. I've always had random thoughts that are like, well, the number 1's blue, the number 4 is orange, the number 8 is like striped orange and green, the number 9 is entirely green. I have this one memory of when I was a little kid, like 2 or 3 years old, and I was barely starting to read, and my mom was reading a book with me, and there were a bunch of words that were meant to describe mean characters and negative things, and they all started with S. And I don't remember what the words were, but I remember looking at the letter S and being like, something is off here. How am I supposed to feel sadness and anger when the letter S is so kind and happy looking? It's such a gentle and sweet letter. I also started associating people with foods and flavors when I was in middle school. I remember telling my mom that I loved my advanced math class, but that my teacher always made me crave mashed potatoes. And my mom was like, why? And I was like, I don't know. She just does. Something about her voice or the sound that the marker makes when she puts it on the board in the class, it just tells me it's mashed potato time. I don't know why, I still don't. I remember learning about synesthesia in a college psychology class, and I was like, I don't know if I fully have that, but I do experience these things sometimes fairly frequently, but because it's not like prevalent enough to interfere with my life, I never pursued learning more about it, and I'd honestly forgotten about it when I've been talking to therapists or psychiatrists in the past. But then reading this, I was like, wait, autistic girls often exhibit synesthesia traits? Are you serious? And then I was like, is literally everything strange that I experience in my life a result of autism? And as the book went on, I realized that the answer is yes. The next point on the list. Gender identity varies with great obviousness among spectrum females. More commonly expected is some level of androgyny in clothing preference and a fluid sexual self-concept, but just as many of us greatly enjoy a rich, distinctly womanly sensuality and or strongly identify with a more classic Hollywood female aesthetic, and most of us fall in the thousands of spaces in between. As always, there are many ways to embrace and embody female, as there are people living the experience. I know that was worded kind of weird, but there are multiple points later in the book where Jennifer mentions that when she says certain things, she's being inclusive of transgender and non-binary people, so she is supportive of that community, even though she doesn't always word things in the way that makes the most sense. But I do think she's trying. I have had so many videos where I've said that my ideal aesthetic is to embody the entire Futch scale at once. I really have two modes. They're opposite ends of the lesbian fashion spectrum. In some of my older videos, you can easily see that I do like to often dress in more traditionally masculine styles, especially when it comes to things like athletic wear. And that's part because I'm a gym girl and part because I don't like the sensory experience of tight clothes, but I've always wanted to have huge muscles. I've always wanted to be strong and powerful, and I've always gravitated towards those butch styles in certain ways. But then, like, for example, right now, like when I'm feeling super feminine, I want to go all the way. I'm gonna either embrace like a butch queer girl look, or I'm gonna do old school Hollywood feminine. There's no in between for me. I'm doing big dresses with like stoner unicorns all over them and my big eyelashes, and with sometimes I got like bright red lipstick, and I'm like, I guess falling into those extremes can be common with autistic women too. Lately I just prioritize like sensory experiences above all else, so I tend to wear either loose fitting clothes or nothing. This book never discusses the fact that a lot of autistic people like to be naked, but I've also found that to be true in speaking with other autistic people as well. Ever since I was a kid, I've always preferred to just take my clothes off. I'm happiest when I'm naked and wrapped in a blanket. I also understand that human society requires us to wear clothes out in public, so I find clothes that work for me. I do my best. The next point is about how we like to line up our toys, which tends to be true for both boys and girls with autism. I like to line up my dolls. When I was a kid, my favorite thing to do when my mom was working late and I had a babysitter was to play video store. It was the mid-90s, okay? And playing video store meant that I just took every VHS tape off of the shelf and lined them up myself on the couch. And then I would create a huge mess by lining up the VHS tapes in my own way, separate from how they were lined up already. I'd forgotten that I liked to do that, but I really liked to do that. I was like, we're gonna play video store. And the babysitter would be like, okay, do you want me to be the customer? And I'd be like, it doesn't matter. I just need to line up all the VHS tapes. Oh my god, this is so relatable. The next one, scripting from favorite TV shows, books, plays, and movies is one of the ways we mask social anxiety best. We copy the dialogue perfectly, though often miss the innuendos beneath. I still have bi-sister brain rot, even though that shit happened 6 years ago now, but anytime someone says the phrase no big deal to me, I cannot stop myself from going, no big deal, sucking dick and cock. I was like, oh my god, time and place, and you did it at my birthday dinner. You were talking in detail about things you wanted to do to the waiter, and when I said, James, he's straight, you said, doesn't matter, I'm a celebrity. So freaking gross. Side note, how the fuck did Tati know that the waiter was straight? That haunts me to this day. How does Tati know the sexual orientation of random waiters at random restaurants? Is she psychic? What the fuck kind of response is, James, he's straight, instead of, James, it's rude to flirt with people at work while they're on the clock? Hello, editing savvy here, and I just thought this was really funny. I was editing this video, and I'm sitting here editing a video about autism and about how I relate to literally every experience in this book. And while I'm editing this video, I am sitting here with 3 American Girl dolls, okay? I've literally got 3 American Girl dolls next to me to help me edit so that I can like touch the different textures of them and play with them whenever I get on focus. And I'm doing that sitting here editing sections of me just going, and you did it at my birthday dinner, and like going through all my vocal stims and things like that while it's literally like the day after my birthday. And while I'm doing this, on my other monitor, I have on my background music that I'm listening to while editing, and it is, if you guys know the band King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, they have the song The Dripping Tap, which is 18 minutes long. It's my favorite song, and I decided to put on a 9-hour playlist of just that song over and over again, but like all the different live versions that span from like 10 minutes long to like 40 minutes long. I was like, I'm gonna just listen to every single different version of this really long song over and over again for 9 hours while I'm sitting here editing the section about my vocal stims in this video about autism with 3 American Girl dolls next to me. I was telling Tyler this, and he was like, oh my god, that's the most autistic thing ever. I just thought it was funny. I hope you're amused by it. Anyway, back to the video. Anyway, I have always memorized scripts from movies and TV shows and now YouTube videos too, and I tend to just recite them at random times. When I was a kid, I loved to memorize episodes of Rugrats and As Told by Ginger, which I could spit out at a moment's notice. In middle school, I memorized the entire script to Napoleon Dynamite, and I can probably quote most of Back to the Future. So again, relatable. The first relatable girl boss who is actually relatable to me. This is a next level breakthrough, okay? I am losing my mind at how happy I'm getting reading this. Jennifer then talks about how autistic girls tend to put a lot of weight on their friendships to the point where they start to become possessive of their friends and freak out when they're worried that their friends might not be as invested as them as the other way around. This was my entire high school experience. I don't even want to get into it, but yes, I annoyed everyone around me nonstop because I'd always accuse other people of bullying me by intentionally leaving me out, when in reality, sometimes different friends just hang out together. I still struggle when to know when I'm actually being left out intentionally versus when that was just like, I don't know how to judge the difference. She mentions that autistic women struggle to understand social hierarchies, which confused me because I was like, what the fuck is a social hierarchy? Any hierarchy of humans automatically must be prejudiced. I don't see how it can't be. So I brought this up to Tyler, my non-autistic husband, and he was like, she means like knowing that your boss has authority over you. And I was like, why should anyone have authority over me? It was funny realizing that this is also an autism trait, because when any of my friends talk to me about things at work, like, my boss says I should do things this way and he insists that I have to follow these instructions, but I know a better way to do it and I need to vent about it because it's so frustrating. My response would always be like, you should refuse to do it their way. Just tell them that your way is better. Just be direct. And in my mind, if someone punishes you for being honest, then they're always in the wrong. And people would be like, yes, but then I'm going to get in trouble at work. People are going to get annoyed with me. And I'd be like, sounds like a hostile and abusive working environment. And they'd be like, well, the boss has the final say on this. And I'd be like, why? To be clear, in many jobs that I've had, I probably have been annoying my bosses a lot of the time. There have been so many times when, like, I just straight up say what I'm thinking, and then people will be like, I got the vibe she was getting annoyed about this. And I was like, what vibe? I didn't notice she was getting annoyed. So I think part of the problem is that it's like a self-perpetuating cycle, that I'm direct and honest with people who have authority over me. And then because they're still trying to play nice within social rules, they don't like outwardly tell me that they're mad at me. They just like try to subtly indicate that they're annoyed with me, which I also don't pick up on. So I just like float through life like being honest and direct is great all the time. And then people are like, and then like years later, I'll be like, why is everyone annoyed with me? The autism signs were so obvious. So I guess I do have difficulty identifying social hierarchies. In my mind, all humans are inherently equal by nature of being human. Jennifer also says that it's common for autistic women to experience oversharing or sharing with the wrong people in the wrong circumstances is a common downfall. And when I read that one to Tyler, he burst out laughing. He was like, oh my God, that is you. I overshare all the time, but I don't see why it has to be a downfall. If people don't like the things I'm saying about myself, they can just tell me that. But again, I'm thinking about this very autistically. Jennifer also says girls on the spectrum are often word or linguistically based thinkers with a keen interest in word and phrase origins, foreign languages, and regional accents, which we have an uncanny ability to imitate. Yep. Anyone who's spent any time on my channel knows how word obsessed I am. I don't think I'm necessarily good at accents, but like, I'm very obsessed with language, that's true. She says, it's not uncommon to see us collecting and rescuing animals. Rescuing animals? Who, me? Me and with all my rescue dogs? Me who can only make eye contact with dogs and not humans? Me who started an entire small business to write books and create plushie friends that tell the true stories of rescue dogs and cats finding a forever home? By the way, foreverhomefriends.com is linked in the description below. We give 10% of our profits to local animal shelters, and this is our last year in operation. When we sell out of plushies, we're going out of business. Boss babe! The next couple points really spoke to me as well, especially this one. We tend to be socially naive, blind to others' motives, and have a tough time clearly distinguishing between levels of a social hierarchy. So again, the whole social hierarchy concept still kind of confuses me, but the part about not distinguishing others' motives, yes, I can never tell when someone's lying to me. As a result, I am very easy to manipulate. I'll be upfront about that. That might be why I've made so much anti-multi-level marketing content on this channel. I'm exactly the kind of person that someone could lie to, and because I can't tell when people are lying, I've made it a mission to try to expose scams so that I and others don't get taken advantage of. This point also, we find it difficult to understand manipulation, disloyalty, vindictive or cruel behavior, and social retaliation because we cannot see strategy or perspective. Again, when she says we here, I just want to make it clear that this is not going to be true for 100% of all autistic women. She's talking partially about her own experiences and trends that she's noticed in her research, and I'm just kind of calling out the ones that really, really speak to me. But for me, it is so natural to assume that everyone is telling me the truth, because it's unnatural for me to lie to someone, so I never assume that people are lying to me by default. But I can also see this severely impacting autistic women's abilities to connect in a relationship, especially when they might have past experience with people lying to them, manipulating them, or taking advantage of them. So why didn't they let Jennifer spend time discussing these traits on Love on the Spectrum? You know, the documentary. She also says hyperlexia, very early, very fast, self-taught, highly skilled reading is common among spectrum girls. And I think that this point is important. A lot of times people don't notice autism in kids if it doesn't include difficulty in school. And for a lot of girls who learn to read early, autism can go unnoticed. This would have been great information for them to let Jennifer discuss on Love on the Spectrum, you know, if it were a real documentary. So again, I'm not going to go over every single item on this list. I don't want this video to be 3 hours long like the Love on the Spectrum deep dive was, but I do want to talk about the last few items on the list because they straight up blew my mind. Challenges with impulsivity, problem solving, emotional balance, and compulsions make us vulnerable to substance use and abuse, alcohol, prescription, and non-prescription drugs, as well as process addictions, eating disorders, self-harm, skin picking, acting out sexually, shopping, gambling, despite our awareness of the negative impact on our lives. What, Jennifer? Did you just crack the code to every single problem I've ever had in my entire life? Jennifer talks a lot in this book about how eating disorders are disproportionately common in autistic women, which makes sense. We tend to fixate on things like numbers and routines, and when we have a high degree of control over our food, that is so easy to turn into disordered eating. I struggled a lot with eating disorders in my teens and early 20s, but especially when I was 16 to 18 years old. That was the period when I was very underweight and experienced a variety of health issues like poor blood circulation, leading for me to have purple lips and constantly be cold and shivering to the point of like full body and limb numbness. My feet were numb for like my entire junior year of high school. And I never quite understood why I was engaging in these behaviors. So much of the media narrative at that time was that eating disorders stemmed in some way from beauty standards, from celebrities on TV being thin, especially because that was a big deal in the 90s, and like girls liking Barbies, things like that. But I didn't really understand that. Maybe that is true for some people, but I never really cared that much about beauty standards because I was always going out of my way to dress weird, to look weird. Remember, I was actively getting bullied for refusing to shave my body hair, and I was already putting my own preferences for my own sensory experiences above social beauty standards. So whether or not like a given celebrity was skinny or I had skinny dolls, like that had no impact on me. I was like, that's them, I'm me, that's different. So I didn't know where these behaviors were coming from. Jennifer talks so many times in this book about how when a girl is admitted for eating disorder recovery to any facility, they should then have the responsibility to evaluate her for autism solely because of how common eating disorders are among autistic girls. I'd seen a lot of reviews of this book saying that they think that that's a ridiculous suggestion because plenty of girls have eating disorders who are not autistic and plenty of autistic women never have EDs, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, sure, okay. But if there is a common correlation here, it is worth looking into. I can't imagine how different my life would have been if I knew at 17 that autism was the root cause of these behaviors. I imagine I would have never fallen into those subsequent years of binge drinking, substance abuse, and risky promiscuous sexual behavior, which Jennifer also notes are common behaviors among autistic women. And it makes sense. Like, while I've never understood the unspoken nuances of male versus female socialization, I did always understand one of the most obvious parts of it, that for women, being flirty was a fast track to receiving positive attention. Now, that attention may look positive on the surface and have dangerous undertones, but of course my autistic ass didn't pick up on that. So as Jennifer explains, it's extremely common for young autistic women in their 20s to engage in risky sexual behaviors, in part because we do struggle to connect with neurotypical people, but we are still desperate for that human connection and validation, which we're not getting from other forms of social interaction. So as women, we know that we'll get some type of validation if we flirt with a lot of people. And don't get me wrong, okay? Lots of women, including autistic women, including me personally, genuinely like sex a lot and are genuinely attracted to a lot of people. But often autistic women, also like me, can fail to notice certain vibes of when a potential sexual partner is dangerous and instead just dive headfirst into the encounter. In my case, not usually headfirst, unless it was with a woman, then it was headfirst, but if it was with a man, I was like, I'm not into sucking strangers strangers' dicks
sucking dick and cock,
because I'm grossed out by putting foreign objects in my mouth. Again, autistic oversharing!
time and place.
But regardless, there's some truth to what's going on there, okay? And again, if Love on the Spectrum had such an incredible resource in Jennifer, why didn't they get her to talk about this? Why didn't Love on the Spectrum feature as a participant a woman who was maybe struggling to find a genuine emotional connection since she had previously sought both sensory stimulation and emotional validation through casual sex and hookups, but now struggled to navigate the romantic aspects of a relationship? Jennifer could have been so helpful in coaching someone like that. It just really angers me because the show very clearly wanted to portray one vision of autism, which was people who are all very socially awkward and as a result have no dating experience. So they have an autistic woman coach them as a performative measure to say, see, we do include autistic people in the production of the show. And to be clear, I am glad that Love on the Spectrum showed people who had no previous dating experience because that's also very common and very normal. But it's not the only experience. We're supposed to be showing a whole spectrum, remember? And it makes me mad that this show never went into the angle of how autism impacts women, especially because I know a lot of autistic women, not just me, who have experiences like this, and Jennifer could have been so helpful in that situation. Remember how in my Love on the Spectrum review, I talked about how so many of the parents on the show support ABA therapy uncritically and how I thought that was an issue? I don't see why they couldn't have had Jennifer give an alternative opinion on this as well. On page 99, she says, "The use of supports and adaptations should be a wonderful follow-up to diagnosis. More than that, though, I think it's my responsibility to the people I love, live with, work with, and to myself to use whatever I can to make all of our experiences together as authentic, considerate, and productive as possible. And as I do for them, I need those same people to understand that I can't be taught or disciplined out of autistic brain functions. Sure, I can practice drills and add to my bag of tricks and tools, but every new situation is a new situation, and executive functioning skills are too interrelated and too interdependent to think that a repair here and some fine-tuning there are going to fix me. It's not going away. It's not. Autistic people are the way we are. And yes, disabilities require accommodations. Yes, people may need to unlearn certain behaviors that could cause physical harm to themselves or others. But at the end of the day, autistic people don't owe you masking. Autistic people are the way we are, and there is nothing wrong with us. I've been saying all along, why can't we educate neurotypical people about our differences? Why can't we just get people to accept that, hey, we might communicate differently, we might behave a little differently, but we're equally human, we all have the potential to do awesome things, and we don't need to judge each other for those differences, but rather educate each other about them. Jennifer right here has this knowledge. She has the ability to educate people on these differences, and the show never gave her space to do that. This feels criminally negligent to me, especially if the show wants us to believe it's in any way a documentary, rather than a reality dating show masquerading as a documentary to avoid paying the cast. Later in the book, there's a story that really resonated with me where Jennifer makes a social faux pas as a teenager, and when I've shared this with other people, they've been like, oh my god, it's so obvious why she shouldn't have done that. That was ridiculous. And I'm like, okay, I would have made the same mistake. And in fact, I don't remember every single thing I've done in my life, but I'd venture to guess that I probably have made this exact mistake. And people are like, well, autism is no excuse for blah, blah, blah. And I felt so seen in this moment in this book. So Jennifer is telling a story about how in the early 90s, she's in high school and her friend is interested in a guy at their school that they both know. So when they're at someone's birthday,
and you did it at my birthday dinner,
her friend asks her, can you gauge interest in this guy for me? So Jennifer goes off to talk to the guy and she asks if he might be interested in her friend. And the guy's like, well, yeah, you know, she's nice. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, do you want to make out? And Jennifer's like, yeah, I do want to make out. And she makes out with him. And her friend is furious.
And you did it at my birthday dinner.
So this is how Jennifer describes it on page 110. In my mind, I hadn't done anything wrong. I had spoken for my friend as asked, and he wasn't interested. End of part 1. Then came part 2, which was to me an entirely separate thing. Dan made a seriously appealing counteroffer, and I went right along without ever imagining that doing it would upset her. Of course it did. Terribly. I get it now. A clear-cut case of terrible, self-centered, mean girl gone wild. Only it wasn't really. My behavior came across as naive at best, and more typically callous, self-centered, and maybe even mean, yet none of those was actually true. I never thought for a moment I was doing anything wrong or hurtful. Empathy, epic level fail. And yet, in my autistic mind, Jennifer's thought process made perfect sense. She gauged interest for her friend, check, item done, and then the guy also wanted to make out with her, Jennifer was like, okay, well, we're two consenting people. Why not? It's not like her friend was in a committed relationship with this guy. I want to be clear. I'm not saying that Jennifer's friend was wrong to be mad. In fact, most people automatically would take her friend's side in this situation. And for good reason. Her friend didn't want Jennifer to make out with this guy. She wanted to be the one making out with him. But that knowledge and that understanding is based on unstated social cues. That knowledge is based on social constructs of things like monogamy being the inherent default, and we all should assume that at all times, and girl codes and not stealing each other's man or whatever, things that I also didn't really ever understand or pick up on as well. I've talked a lot before on my channel about how autistic women often get falsely categorized as pick-me girls. It's very easy for neurotypical people to see an autistic woman failing to understand social norms within mostly female friend groups and then doing things like making out with the guy their friend's interested in and be like, wow, you're really not a girl's girl, are you? But that's not necessarily true. In a lot of cases, this knowledge does not come naturally. Now, if Jennifer's friend had explicitly told her, hey, gauge interest, see how the guy feels about me, I would like to have a committed monogamous relationship exclusively with him, and I would be very hurt if he were to make out with someone else. Yeah, if Jennifer had then gone and made out with him, that would have been cruel of her, right? Like, that would have made sense. But without that explicitly laid out, that type of social norm is not always obvious. It hasn't been to me historically, and I'm sure there are plenty of other autistic women out there who will say, you know, well, I'm autistic and I would never do something like that. It is very obvious to me how that would hurt the other girl. And friends, that's why we call it a spectrum. This might be kind of a controversial opinion. I'm gonna go into it anyway, though. I think a lot of neurotypical people have a vested interest in dividing autistic people. You know, kind of like how the billionaire class wants to make regular ass Americans fight with each other while they screw us all over. Divide and conquer has long been a strategy for those who want to dominate marginalized groups of people. And that's why we see so many posts on subreddits like r/am-I-the-asshole with fake stories about autistic people behaving obnoxiously, only for the entire comment section to go, well, I'm autistic too, and I would never behave like that. I'm one of the good ones. People want us to fight. They want us divided. So if you're an autistic woman as well and you think that Jennifer was obviously wrong in this case, that's fine. I'm glad you wouldn't have made this mistake. That's a good thing. But please, try not to judge her. Try not to separate yourself from her as one of the good autistics. Please remember that autism does impact us all differently, and while autism does not excuse her behavior in the sense that, yes, it was perfectly reasonable and valid for her friend to be upset with her, and Jennifer did then owe her friend an apology if she wanted her friend to forgive her, please also try to understand where she's coming from. We can't learn to do better if neurotypical people just punish us for not understanding social norms and then recruit the pick-me autistics to agree that, yeah, autism is no excuse for this or that or this thing that autism for many of us does literally impact. There's a difference between an explanation and an excuse. Jennifer's behavior was hurtful to her friend, and for that she owed her friend an apology, and her friend had every right to reconsider their friendship because that friend's feelings of betrayal are also valid. But it is still worth looking into how autism can lead to these types of thought processes, and how we might better modify our communication so that we can understand each other's expectations better. I hope that makes sense. Jennifer then on the next page goes into an example of how, as an adult, she met with her daughter's teacher, and the teacher told Jennifer to share everything with her about her daughter's own autism diagnosis. She wanted to accommodate this girl the best she could, so she said, you know, share everything that you've learned about her autism diagnosis, her sensory needs, etc. When the teacher instructed Jennifer to share everything and tell her all about it, Jennifer took that literally, as I also would have. It wasn't until Jennifer explained it that I even understood what she did wrong. So she says, it's not a literal request, but interest in a summary or highlight reel explanation. I followed directions and did share everything. I clogged her inbox with simply enormous amounts of information and then sent a binder into school so that anything lost in the process would still make it in. Oh, but I didn't just send tests and reports. Nope, I also included helpful articles, advice, and lesson suggestions that would help my girl play on her strengths while developing areas of challenge. Except the teacher was disgusted with me. Instead of helpful, she found me presumptuous. Instead of being a resource, she found me overbearing and full of myself. She felt challenged in her authority, condescended to, and disrespected, and worst of all, as a result, was completely irritated by my daughter. The next week, I was called into the vice principal's office to receive a bit of a tongue lashing from him too. His faculty had many students to consider and many tasks to accomplish. It really was unacceptable for me to have flooded the teacher's email to speak with such authority to a veteran educator, or to expect such prioritization of my child. What? And I cannot emphasize this enough. The fuck? You can't ask someone to tell you everything and then get mad when they tell you everything. My teacher in Christ, that is literally what you asked her to do. And yes, it is also valid for the teacher to be annoyed. Autistic communication is not inherently superior, just as neurotypical communication isn't either. We all need to work harder at understanding one another and not automatically assuming malice. That's how I see it. It's so easy for an autistic person to take an instruction literally, to do exactly what was asked, and then when they explain why they misinterpreted the instruction, for the other person to be like, don't play dumb, you knew what I meant. From what I've seen, autistic men tend to be infantilized, while autistic women tend to be villainized. People assume that our intentions are bad, and then when we try to explain that we legitimately didn't understand what you were saying, then we get accused of playing dumb as a get out of jail free card, or feigning ignorance, or being purposefully obtuse just to be difficult. It's so frustrating, and after a while it starts to make us wonder, at least me, start to make me wonder if deep down, maybe I really was just difficult. Maybe I really am just a difficult person. And this is also why autistic women are disproportionately prone to being abused. There's a chapter towards the end of the book, which I'm not going to read most of it out loud because of how horrifying it is. I do appreciate that Jennifer gives us a trigger warning at the start of the chapter. I chose to read it anyway. Maybe that was a mistake because it was pretty horrifying. So I'm grateful that she did warn her readers. She really does legitimately seem to care about other people and their feelings. In this chapter, Jennifer talks about her first major relationship that she has in college. She's this popular cheerleader and sorority girl, and she's dating the president of a fraternity, and everyone thinks they're just like the perfect power couple. But behind closed doors, he's abusing her. She details her thought process throughout the relationship, how all her life she's been told that she's difficult on purpose. Her whole life, other people have ignored her or written off her quirks as annoying or struggled to connect with her. So when she has someone who actually does want to spend time with her, like, you know, this boyfriend, she puts up with the abuse because deep down she feels unlovable. When he tells her that he's not really abusing her and she's just being difficult, she believes it because all her life she's been told that she's being difficult. She started to believe that about herself. I will just read the end of the chapter on page 210 because I think the way Jennifer describes it hits really hard and she doesn't have any specific, like, triggering examples in there. Being on the spectrum does not in any way mean that a woman or a girl is destined to be in an abusive relationship. Not at all. On the contrary, being aware that she is different and of the ways she is different is the cornerstone to knowing how to empower her, what to teach her to watch for, what to teach her to cherish, to know above all that yes, like everyone in the world, there are things she can do and ways she must grow to be the best friend and partner she can be. And before she looks outward, she needs to know herself, needs to know that without exception, she is believed, that even when her perspective is limited or her reactions feel extreme to others, they are entirely authentic and real for her, that we will honor and love her for them, not in spite of them. More than a promise, that's a responsibility. Jennifer then went on to work as a counselor specializing in helping victims of domestic violence. And again, this is a place where I am infuriated that Love on the Spectrum as a TV show did not consult with her. Cian O'Clery, you have at your disposal an autistic woman with professional counseling experience who has literally written an entire extensive, heartbreaking chapter in her book about how society's terrible treatment of autistic women left her in a position where she was uniquely vulnerable to an abusive relationship. And you didn't have her talk about any of this on a show where she's coaching autistic women who are about to enter new romantic relationships? I just cannot get over how irresponsible Cian O'Clery is as a quote-unquote documentary filmmaker. The more I learn about Jennifer Cook, the more I realize that Love on the Spectrum was never made with an autistic audience in mind. It was never a documentary meant to educate people about how dating might look for autistic people, the unique challenges we might face, and how we can adapt and accommodate one another. It was always just another reality dating show, combined with a bit of dehumanizing autistic people and treating us like animals in a nature documentary that the viewers can observe from a distance, but never really think too hard about. While Jennifer Cook's Autism in Heels as a book definitely isn't perfect, it does provide so much valuable information about what it's like to be an autistic woman, especially an outgoing autistic woman like me who often gets overlooked when it comes to childhood diagnosis. I'm gonna say that Autism in Heels was a solid 4-star read for me. It had a few flaws that left me a bit confused and places where it could have delved a lot deeper, but the parts that hit hard hit really hard. I have never related to a book, especially one by a girl boss who's a professional coach and speaker and all the things I'm usually so cynical about. But this book hit different, at least for me. And hey, like we all say, autism is a spectrum, so it's entirely possible that another autistic woman will read this book and not relate to any of it. But it was just a really magical experience for me to feel so seen in someone else's book. I'm really glad that Jennifer Cook exists and that she's out here writing, because when she opens up about all of these experiences, she reminds me that I'm not alone. And honestly, for my entire now 33 years of life, okay, it's weird to say, okay, because right now while I'm filming this video, I'm 32 years old, but my birthday is gonna happen before, like, while I'm in the process of editing the video. My birthday is gonna happen in a couple days.
And you did it at my birthday dinner.
So when the video goes out on my channel, I'll be 33 years old. In my entire 32 to 33 years of life, I have never seen someone else understand what's been going through my head my entire life the way that Jennifer does. Jennifer and I are very different on the surface. She's a mother, I'm not. I'm queer, as far as I know she's not, although I could be wrong. She loves wearing heels. I physically can't wear heels. Shout out to the fancy new cane I got at the Renaissance Fair to help me with my back problems. Leave me comments below with suggestions for what we should name the cane. I'm looking for names for it. Jennifer and I have a lot of differences, but knowing that there's another outgoing, extroverted, friendly autistic woman who also spent her life being told she was too loud, being told she's difficult on purpose, being told she's too smart to not pick up on these seemingly obvious social cues, knowing that she's out there reminds me that there's someone else who's like me and that I don't have to go through life alone. So I want to extend a huge thank you to Jennifer for writing this book, and I want to extend a huge fuck you to Kean O'Cleary for underutilizing Jennifer in your quote-unquote documentary about autism. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. I'm curious what you all think as well. I have more videos in the works about book community stuff, about new book reviews, so stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe. I will see you guys again next week for more videos. In the meantime, though, have a great weekend. Bye!
Get you some nuts.
Yeah, you effin'.
Up yours, woke moralist. We'll see who cancels who.